Welcome back, everyone, to another build review. Dr. Bond is with me again today, and we're going to be talking about the recent Kibo contest. I'm just going to have Dr. Bond tell us a little bit about this particular contest from this past year.
Thank you so much for inviting me today. This year for Kibo, we've decided to tackle the theme of sensation. We are doing the five senses, so touch, smell, taste, hearing, and sight. A lot of the contestants this year have been very clever in their way of adapting to the theme. So we've had sub themes of like the lack of sensation. We've had themes like joy or ecstasy through listening to music, which is through hearing, or the technological advancements of VR and sort of that fake sensation that you might get through like the brain and the synapse. One of the main objectives of Kibo is to promote organics in the community. I think a lot of the themes and the events that we hold here are really trying to push new players and old returning players to unleash their creative potential, which is why, we have all these extra, I don't know what to call them.
Oh, like recognitions.
Yeah, like recognitions. We also have physical raffle prizes as well that started last year. And so we're really just trying to promote interest in how creative we can be and how beautiful building can be. That is the biggest goal of Kibo. I think to a lot of people, especially this year, there have been quite a lot of building competitions combined with like, all these other building servers and these huge communities. But I think Kibo is very unique in the way that we promote art in a certain way, and it
Mm-hmm.
really, really shines through how builders are able to communicate. There's always a little bit of like riffraff and like excitement on the server day one. And then everyone gets really stressed. And then they're like all talking about like, what's the time? And like, this is like always a continuous cycle, but we all band together and form like a very, very strong bond by the end of it,
No
new
pun
or old.
intended.
No pun intended, thank you. And so I think it's a very beautiful thing to see, anyone who can just join and just sort of, you know, come into this really not knowing much. You'll see even, some of the plots that we'll review, a lot of the contestants this year are actually quite new. Maybe not in building, but new to Kibo itself. And so I was just very, very happy to see everyone super welcoming of them and just how successful this year's competition was.
And I would like to throw in just real quick because I do get comments like this on other videos where they might look at some of the builds and feel very daunted, like, oh, I would never be able to do that, so I would never join
Mhm.
a competition like that. But there's always a good mix of fairly new builders to the community and also the very well seasoned ones. There's always a mix of that skill level. Just because you might see things and you might think that there's no way you could possibly place in the contest, just the fact that you're trying is saying a
Mhm.
lot about your determination to get better.
Competitions can be very daunting. I think the beautiful thing about Kibo is it is in a way a source of inspiration to see people, live working so hard, like day by day by day for 3 weeks straight. Like you can log on at the start of the contest and then near to the end, and they'll have been on for like a couple of days straight, no sleep, hopefully food, and they'll just be like working, working, working. And to me, that is a source of inspiration because you can see all the parts coming together, their ideas, the creativity. And if you're more of like a technical person, you can see how they're using tools. And so even if you don't know exactly how to, go about the theme, or you're not very experienced in competition building in general, I still think it's a beautiful thing. Just like log on and, see what people are doing and talk to your friends and hopefully become inspired.
Absolutely. Now, are you ready to go look at some plots?
Let's do it. This one is Synesthesia by todpog. One of the first things that really stood out to me is his very, very unique style. I don't want to run off into a tangent immediately, but there's like been a trend or like a meta of Minecraft building very lately, like a couple years, where people have been leaning very heavily into detailing. The palette obviously has extended quite far with all these new updates. We just literally got one with the pale wood. And I think one of the great benefits of this is you're able to color in detail to a lot more of a micro scale. And within, I think, each person's like stylistic decisions, a lot of this detailing plays a huge, huge factor. And so I think todpog is one of those builders that really enjoys what we call perspective building. That is, using all these micro blocks, detailing. Obviously, this one is not necessarily that. The face has been beautifully detailed. There's so much going on. I think this is quite a huge direction in which building has been taken. Really, really impressive work. His take on the theme of sensation was quite a really, really cool take. So, synesthesia is the experience of sensing one or more senses simultaneously, which is to say, like when you're eating, you see color, or when you listen to music, you see texture, things like that. And so, I think he did a brilliant job kind of incorporating all of these together. So there's like, the girl's eating, she has earbuds in, she's listening to music, but she also has this very interesting like weightlessness to her. And she's like, riding the skateboard. And so all these sensations sort of culminate into this world he's created of sensation or combination of senses. Did get second place, and I think it's extremely well deserved. It is a very, very beautiful build.
And you've summed that up so wonderfully that I don't really have much else to add to it. I think it's really well done too. And I like the colors too. The colors really, I like the colors of the. Is this a spray paint coming out? It's making
Yeah,
that. I thought that was really creative too. And the spray paint is turning into the words also.
yeah, I
It's-
thought it's like, kind of like a graffiti, like, take on the font as well. It's just very much him, I think. Like, I can kind of almost feel, like, that personality from Todd Pog, 'cause, he's added his name on, like, the bottom of the skateboard. I don't know if he skates or not, but, it's just, like, all these little details, I think, really create a certain atmosphere, which is definitely one of the things the judges look out for, when grading. And so, this year with sensation being the theme, I think it's, even more imperative that builders kind of take on or tackle on not just building, but trying to create like this atmosphere of building, to really, elicit or like connect people to that sensation or that sense that they're building off of.
So this next plot is called Making a Meltdown by SuperSideKian. I think the whole idea of this one is that it's playing on the idea of a cat's fears.
So the general idea that he had, I believe, was overstimulation in the beginning. As we all know, with like very ambitious builds, often time is one of those like factors that ends up making things or breaking things. And I think for him, representation of overstimulation ended up being more the representation of fear. And so we have like all of these very bright neon, like fractal things going on, which kind of invokes that overstimulation vibe with the cat reacting as the fear reaction. I really, really like how smooth everything kind of felt. I don't know, like the best way to describe it, like it felt in place. There was nothing that really felt off about this build. Everything was like very well done, very well smooth. I think, the colors and the tools and techniques he used all really benefited his main idea, which is, to create something that was highly readable, but also highly overstimulating. and which, represented through the colors. And so I think he did a really, really good job with that. Yeah, there was like a thing in the what do you call it? Light. I think he was saying he wanted to turn the quartz ore into a white block, but he couldn't in time.
Oh,
So he was like
it's
panicking at the very, very end.
I don't worry. I don't think that would make or break the build. I think you're fine.
Yeah, no, trust. Trust, trust me, I agree.
Yeah, the colors are really fun in this one. I didn't really think about it as much until you said it about how the ice is highlighting all the different colors, almost
Mhm.
giving it like a fuzzy effect, if you will. Like the
Yeah.
colors just are being blurred together, which is interesting.
It's almost like the glass shattering, and then you can see, like, the edges of the glass, like, refracting or reflecting
Oh
all those, like,
yeah,
I don't know what you call them, like, light? I don't know. It's
like a
like when you look
prism.
at, like yeah, like, exactly, like a prism. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I also noticed that there were dragon heads used in front of the cat's eyes. Probably one of the more unique blocks. I love how we just like throw in whatever blocks we can just for the sake of using them. Also, the inside of that mouth is terrifying. I don't know what it is about.
Yeah, that definitely gives off fear to me. I'm
I
not
would be
sure.
afraid if I was looking at inside that mouth too. But I do like the colors. I think the scales are really well done, and like you said, everything looks
Mhm,
very readable and very
mhm.
clear and distinct, which is something that I like to do as a builder. That's very much my style, is to have very, very distinct shapes, and I think that that's a good job was done for all of those things in this plot. Time was probably a factor for all of the builders, not just this one. But when you're
Mhm.
trying to come up with ideas and you only have 3 weeks to do it, and with a theme of overstimulation, I'm sure you could have added a lot more to this plot to make it feel even more overstimulated. Because as it is, it feels like it could have just used a little something else. I'm not sure what. I do like what's here, though. I think it's really good.
I think one of the interesting things about Kibo I've realized specifically, maybe why people might feel the time rush, is I've noticed a lot of the competitions recently have been giving 4 weeks, like a month. Kibo has always originally, well, it was 2 weeks originally, and then it was bumped up to 3 weeks. No promises on if it will go to 4 weeks, but I think that is one huge factor in why people really consider time, like time management, a huge skill within
I think even with the
Kibo.
4 week contest, people struggle with it. So no worries
Yeah.
there. I think we'd all just have problems managing our time, and it also depends on what time of the year it falls and like what other priorities you have.
That's very
And every
true. Yeah.
person's going to have a different situation too. So some people are able to,
Christmas, New
yeah, some people
Year's.
are able to push
Yeah.
out amazing things in 3 weeks, while others just don't have
Yeah.
the time to dedicate to that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I think, yeah, there'll be I think it's very interesting because now we have, modern tool usage and things to really speed up building and that whole process. And so I think a lot of the people that do end up completing their idea or like their initial plan do fully try to utilize all of those like modern tools and techniques. So they do have the extra time later to go back and hand detail, hand smooth, or flesh out, the concept. This plot is by Yuzuki, and the title is Okami Otoko, or in English, werewolf. And as you can see, there is the main organic in this is the werewolf. I think a lot of the symbology that I see comes from Japanese culture. You have, the Japanese maple leaves, you have the spider lily flowers, and I think that really vivid color combination of like cyan and red creates for a really, really striking composition. I do think also they may have run out of time.
it does look like it wasn't as fully fleshed out as it could have
Detailed.
been. Yeah, especially when you look at the back side of the head, or like the side with the cyan colors. It's just not as
Yeah.
detailed. Like there wasn't as much time for it. but there
I
was
think what
definitely a
was
lot more
detailed
time.
is like beautiful, like
Oh yeah, the details
the
on the front and the
side of the
face are
face.
great.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Um, the drip of the coming out of the mouth, I think was really, really well done. Really good blending of colors. I think like when people typically choose two opposites to create sort of this like pull and tug of color to, create their ideas, oftentimes it can be like 50-50. Like it's very like one side is one color, the other side is the other color. But I think here it was done really well where like the blending of, cyan and the red was done really well on the side of the face. And so it doesn't really
Mhm.
seem like it's 50-50. It's like an asymmetrical blend of color.
Yeah, there's like some cyan on the shoulder even and
Mhm.
on this leg down here just to show that it's coming from the other side because it would have looked a little bit drastic if it was just stark red on one side. So that blends everything
Yeah.
together much better.
I think, they were very clever with their time usage here. Like, I'm sure they ran out, but they let, the shadows sort of like take over on the other side of the face, so they didn't have to finish it too
Hmm.
much. So,
And even the rest of the body, it's kind of nebulous for lack of a better
mhm.
word. It's just all kind of morphed into simple shapes that aren't really
Mhm.
refined, but it still fills up the plot and it just looks like it almost looks like a cloud of smoke behind him. Well, there is definitely smell being shown here because he's smelling
Yes.
the blood from the prey that he's chasing.
Oh, I think that was a really big theme a lot of people actually chose this year was like sense, but not human sense, like sense heightened through like animal instincts.
I can't remember now the symbolism of the colors because I know there was a reason for it. Like one is supposed to represent, calm and peace, and other is like rage and you
Mhm.
can even see that reflected in the eyes. Like the side with the blue eye is just like a normal looking eye, but then the one that's being taken over by the scent is like turning blood red. Like his
Yeah.
demeanor is changing too.
I think it was self-awareness and primal urge. It really is it's like a striking feature when it's like in the red and in the blue.
I just wish that there was more time to put into it to get details in the other sections, but I mean, it's understandable. There's still a lot here, still a lot of great details in this plot. This next one was by NotSumNerd, and it is titled Forget Me Not. And this one is the winner of the entire competition. And it
Mhm.
features a large feature of a man in the front, and I think him struggling with just his ability to remember things, if I'm not mistaken. I have to brush up on the description
Yeah,
again.
this one really I think this was the one that moved me the most. The way that Not Some Nerd kind of put together the theme in their own words, I think was extremely beautiful take on this year's concept, which was sort of the loss of sensation through memory and old age. Of course, we have the huge bust of the main character, the elderly man. He's holding his head in his hands, possibly, trying to remember or forgetting certain things. And then you have his like inner voice kind of stumbling through the corridor of his memories, kind of lost, but barely able to, move through his headspace. And, accented on the sides are the forget me not flowers. I could definitely envision this just as an art piece in a museum. That's how beautiful I think it is. Does deviate a little bit from their usual approach to how they build in Minecraft. A lot of these builders have been building in Kibo for quite some time, and they're known for a certain stylistic aesthetic. I think this year they decided to sort of deviate from their usual building style, and I think it turned out amazingly. It was a great decision. I think this style represents, everything that they wanted to tell us, the viewer, in the most beautiful, somber, clear way.
In the description, it talks about how he's finding familiarity in the walls and everything by through his touch. So in a way,
Mm,
he's kind of remembering things or trying to remember things through that sensation of touch, which you wouldn't really pick up on from looking at it, except for the fact that he has these glowing handprints on the walls, like his memory's almost being restored in those spots. Or
hmm.
maybe not that exactly, but it's definitely a brighter spot in his
And they're
mind.
like so well represented in how it's shaded and
Yeah, I just love that depiction of his touch kind of bringing light to his mind, but then everything
mhm.
else around him is still enveloped in darkness.
I think you can see um that there is like a bicycle. I think these are like part of his previous like maybe lost memories inside like the corridor. There's like little bits and bobs of like all these little things in his mind that used to be in his life.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, I like the subtle hint of the forget me nots just being there.
The next plot is by Nistune, titled Precious Fragments. The thing that struck out to me the most was how they were able to incorporate memory or nostalgia into the sense, which was, I believe they picked smell. Smell or taste? Which one? Wait.
Probably
Smell,
both,
right?
but this build I think is more directly showing the smell.
And I think they did a really amazing job with glassing the light. Obviously, like when you go around the plot while you're holding, the light source block, you can see how they
Oh,
kind of went
I
about.
can't give myself the block.
Oh, but I think the glassing plus the light blocks really showcased just how elegantly they're able to create that atmosphere of bringing the player into the story and sort of drawing out as much potential as possible of the build. And I think this one just came together beautifully. It had the highest clarity score combined throughout all the plots, and so I think it is a very clear favorite in terms of how the story came together and how beautifully elegant the theme was incorporated into the build itself.
The technique used here is a little different from many of the other plots. It is detailed and it has like detailing blocks everywhere, but the amazing thing is it's all mostly full glass
Full
blocks.
blocks, yeah.
Kind of the opposite of what say todpog did with his with the super detailing blocks, everywhere. This is kind of doing the same thing, changing the colors underneath, but just using basic blocks. It kind of just goes to show that there's multiple ways of achieving the same kind of details. Like you don't have, it's not like there's one way that is the best way.
Totally agree. Especially when you consider how, everyone has sort of a different journey into how they get into Minecraft. So people have been building for, certain times. They get into Minecraft at a certain stage where, perhaps someone who's been building longer has more interest in, this full block aesthetic more so than someone who's joined recently, who's been seeing sort of this modern resurgence of all these like micro blocks and detailing, coloring. And so it doesn't really say too much about like the technique level if you're using or not using, blocks or glass or little, fence gate. It's more so like in what way can you best showcase your idea in a way that can communicate visuals to the viewer. And as long as the viewer
Mm-hmm.
is, fully communicated to, I think that is, the main message. And there's a lot of, aesthetic, nuances that comes with choosing a certain, way to detail. But I think ultimately it is sort of, to showcase the main idea and the story to its fullest.
I do like how the texturing on this it just makes the whole build feel really warm and comforting. When I first saw this plot, it just made me feel happy.
It it has that like homey vibe to it. Kind of like you walk into home
Yes.
and there's like cookies in the oven. I don't know if people.
Yeah, it really does. And I think that was the whole point. And
Yeah.
I think it achieves it really well through the coloring, and especially like everything just feels really
Yeah.
warm and bright.
Also, I love the facial expressions. Like it exudes like kindness, especially like out of the grandma. Like I can just feel how kind and warm she is, which is, you know, quite hard to do. Of course, there's like so many different ways to make faces and stuff, but when you actually get into it, it's like quite hard to do to showcase like emotion through blocks. And so,
Hmm.
really, really well done.
This one's called Thrill of the Hunt by Zerinsian. And I forget it's been a while, it's been a few weeks since I've actually read the plot descriptions. So you might have to refresh my memory on this one.
No problem. I think this one was sort of like the apex moment in which the hunter, who has been on a wild, wild goose chase, chasing this legendary mythical creature, the Nian, I believe, from Chinese mythology. Finally, he has found the quote unquote monster and is about to take his aim and shoot. And so it's sort of like, all of these like elements. So you have like the ripped flags, the sort of chaoticness of like the struggle. You have that sort of like perfect moment of like just time slows down almost and the hunter takes its shot. The sense really was an interesting take that Zerinstein took, which was sort of the heightened sense of a extremely skilled hunter who's honed his ability through like nature and practice and experience to go on these, wild hunts to find these legendary creatures. I think that was a very, very clever way in which he went about the interpretation of the theme. The sort of like layout of the theme is a little bit maybe too chaotic. There's quite a lot of like artifacts, like the leaves maybe were a little bit overdone in my opinion. Maybe what could have been better was like ripped flag fragments, for example, to keep it like a little bit more in theme. I think overall it does exude quite an emotional like a whoa, like so much going on, so much chaos.
I would have done the fur a little bit differently, maybe in clumps instead of like one big mass of fur, or make it look a little more distinct instead of it all kind of blending with itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because right now you look at it and it all seems to be a flat. Now, do I have a night vision on? Oh, no, I don't. See, I don't have night vision on because people get on to me about that. Even with my night vision off, it all kind of just, I don't know, kind of blends with each other. So you can't really tell the distinct shapes of the creature underneath all of that. Not that you have to per se, but I think it could have been clarified just a little bit better. At first glance, I thought that all of this yellow was fire, but it's actually grass.
Oh, I thought it was fire.
I
Uh,
thought it was fire too, but I think it's supposed to be grass.
I think then maybe he was kinda going for, like, that sort of tundra look, perhaps?
Hmm.
Sort of like the Himalaya sort of, like, dead grass
But
look.
then I would have used brown.
Um, yeah, that would yeah, yeah.
That's just something that you got to be careful of with your colors. Like it's perfectly fine to like deviate and do something that's a little bit more vibrant and unnatural, but it needs to be clear to the viewer what you're trying to do. I do like the design of the creature though. I think it's really creative because I think he designed it all himself.
Yeah, I think he used multiple elements. Contestants are this year specifically, there's a submission box in which you're allowed to submit, any concept art that you've based your idea off of. I believe he sent in quite a bit. So I think he used like little bits and bobs of like, parts of the concept, but ultimately it was original piece.
Well, this next one is called in two forms by Drber, and you can read the description to see what it's representing. I think this one is really well built and textured. I think the face is done really well, and I like how it's got that kind of that eerie glow in the eyes, the same glow that you see in the fox's eyes, like it's in the middle of a transformation phase.
The face proportions are quite good. I think he did very well with detailing and shading as well. And he's been building for quite a long time in Kibo as well, so it's always nice to Derber, if you're watching, you're always like the one to like hype everyone up and like talk to everyone. So I really appreciate that as well. He's always like active in chat and stuff, so kind of keeps people like awake and like
Goofing off.
yeah, goofing
There's
off.
a lot of that
I do.
too.
I did see talking about goofing off. If you go into the lady's mouth, he made like a little
Oh yeah, I did see that if you go in
house.
here.
I
This is
didn't
the
see
kind of
that
stuff.
initially. Yeah, until I went
And
into
it
GMT,
says
I was like,
mouth house.
oh. Yeah, and then if you go up into the chimney, there's also like it's like a secondary Easter egg of like there's like a tiny hole with
Oh.
Steve
Oh,
you can
I
see.
can't even get up there to see it.
It's like slightly below the top.
I know I can't control my speed. I'm going too
Oh.
fast.
But that was like a really funny discovery. I was like, oh, of course.
That does not hinder your grade, by the way, just because we find it funny.
It's like kind of I don't know if you remember, people used to I call it like black boxing, but like erect like all these like huge boxes around their plots so people can't like peek. And now the meta has shifted to like making AFK spots instead.
Compositionally, one thing that confused me a bit was these little. I guess it's like a sound wave coming out of the hands. Is that what that's supposed to be? Because I can't really figure it out. What that blue ring is supposed to represent.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I thought maybe it was supposed to represent something to do with like a sensation, like touch, maybe some sort of like visual aid to help with that. So it's like sight, touch, hearing. And so like in the fox's ears, there's like little particles to like indicate the hearing portion, and the hands of the human side. There's like the touch, and then the sight maybe her eyes. I don't know, have to confirm, but that was like my little
Mm-hmm.
interpretation of that.
And one other thing I do appreciate about this, which I think we did see it in last year's plot by Bob Geem.
Oh, Bob
Yeah,
Geem,
when with
yes.
the water, this looks a lot like the water that Bob Geem did in his plot last year. So the colors
Yeah.
and everything makes me think of it. But I think it's really well done.
The next plot is Dream of Purple Clay by Senmatsu. Per their description, this was their first build ever. So huge congratulations and thank you for joining Kibo. It's very daunting. So thank you for joining. And what a beautiful first plot. I believe that their plot was themed upon tea culture. So this is a Yixing pot with tea inside, and I believe the girl inside is a representation of the builder themselves. They were very, very descriptive in their write up of how tea was really important to them. I believe all these little speckles in the texturing of the pot are like very specific to the type of clay that they use. Hence the name Dream of Purple Clay. The tea is also very specific, so, like, they chose a specific tea and the coloring for it as well, it's like a brownish reddish tea. So everything I think kind of showcases, like, how passionate they are about tea culture, and they try to represent it as best as they could.
Yeah, it's not bad at all for a first build. My first builds were so much worse.
Yeah. Oh, same, trust me. Yeah, I was very, very impressed. Like, as a first time build, like learning tools and stuff nowadays is like there's so much stuff that you just have to learn up and look up first before even building. And so I think that's also why the scale is quite small. Maybe they didn't use like Axiom or like, any of the modern tools.
Or maybe they did, because some builders find
Or
those a
maybe
lot
they did.
easier now than the old ways.
I do have to say the top of the lid is like quite smooth as a first time builder. How crazy would it be if this was hand smooth? Because there are like inconsistencies with it. So it's not like a perfect like a 3D model.
Mm-hmm. Even though this plot is like so simple, I love it. Kind of gives off like the sensation that you feel like when drinking a cup of hot tea, and I don't know, it just makes you feel
Yeah,
warm and cozy, and it's kind of what
it
this
does.
this build makes me feel.
Yeah. I think it was a great idea to add the organic inside the pot. So it's kind
It's
of like a
so
multifaceted like
yeah.
taste, smell, but also feeling of the tea. Yeah.
I just thought it was really cute, and yeah, especially good for a first time ever build.
Amazing. Yes. This one was called, I had to look it up on Twitter. It was representation of an ecstatic transcendence. Quite wordy, but hopefully we don't trip over the words.
I like how this one's clearly representing, music and how it makes one react to music and the sensations you feel because of the music. But I also love
Mhm.
just the way the colors are represented in this plot. I don't know what it is about this cloth that's flying around and how it's textured, but it just looks so smooth and
I believe one of like the big points that he made was he wrote that he hand colored the cloth. I think that worked out really, really well.
I think it's my favorite part. Like just the way it's
Yeah.
colored. I like it.
Yeah, it's very, very distinctive. I think it works well against like how the skin was textured. They're like two very different ways of texturing, so they're very like opposites. So it's very easy to read as well. I think music was one of the lesser, or like hearing was one of the lesser explored senses this year in terms of theme. It was really good to get one that was directly related to music.
The organic itself could have seen some improvements in terms of the shaping. I noticed that the neck muscles, they're just absolutely bulging. They probably could have been toned down a little bit, as well as
Maybe it's the gold headphones. Gold's quite heavy, so
oh
that's
yeah,
why.
okay. So she's got to support those headphones, I see.
Yeah.
Ah.
She's working overtime.
But one other thing, this is a very subtle thing, but I just thought I pointed out. Like, I don't always notice this stuff, but because I did notice it, that's the only reason I'm going to point it out. I just noticed it in the back where you have this
Mhm,
this shadow, this shading in the back. The way that this
mhm.
purple circle is lower on the back kind of is supposed to highlight where the shoulder is, I think, but it makes it look like the shoulder is in the middle of the back. The way it's
Right.
shaded. So I think what could have helped is if you kind of emphasized where that shoulder was using the texturing, because it almost
Mhm.
when I was looking at it, I was like kind of confused, like why is the shoulder in the middle of the back? But not that it's actually there, it's just the colors making it look like that.
Right, there's, anatomy distinction through blocks, but also through
Yeah.
shading. Yeah, yeah.
So that was just one thing I wanted to point out with this one, but I do like how the rest of it is colored. I think the colors are really fun. Like the hints of the pink and blue on the skin make it really stand out. Oh, is that redstone dust? Why did I not realize that before? I don't think I've ever seen a
Yeah.
builder use redstone dust as a building material.
Yeah, it's very distinctive, it's super bright,
Yeah,
so
it's
you can,
probably
like
why, because this whole thing glows at night.
I think great idea to use the record as a base as well. Just keep it all in line with the theme.
Could have easily just done nothing for the base, but that just pulls everything
Mhm.
together.
The next plot is by Foresee You, and it is titled, I have to say it in English because my French pronunciation is much to be desired. It is Reunion, but in French. The first thing that I really immediately gravitated towards was just how clean the lines are in this plot. I have watched Foresee build quite a lot. He's participated many times in Kibo, and every time I'm just so happy to see how clean everything looks. Like he puts a lot of attention into the cleanliness of the lines of the blocks. The theme I also quite enjoyed. Sort of the title alludes to the story, which is basically a knight who has met his end and he is being reunited in sort of that life and death aspect of an angel. I think it was just very poetic. Everything came together. Knight looking up to her, her looking down to him, sort of in like a warm embrace of recognition. There's little motifs like the crow, perhaps signaling, death, and just the overall, again, cleanliness of how everything was built is just always so, so impressive.
The use of light in this one too is also notable. I love how the edges of her dress are glowing, and then
Mhm.
she's leaving all of the flowers, and basically she's bringing forth life in her wake. Like everywhere she steps, wherever her feet are, flowers come out. And I love that attention to detail in the base. I think that's one of the things that struck me about this build was, I mean, there are many other builds, not just this one, where there's so much. It almost seems like half of the build itself is just in the environment and what's surrounding the actual
Mm.
organics, which I really appreciate stuff like that because it's something that I try to do as much as I can with my builds. I'm not always the best at it. Some people are better than me, but that's the kind of stuff that I really appreciate is when the environment really brings everything together. Which we already have looked at some that do that, but I feel like this one takes it to a whole other level, just with how it's
Yeah,
interacting with the two organics, the two main organics.
I think it's just a great tool as well to bring like, the atmosphere, which is oftentimes a huge component in how composition works out in the end. Also, I just like how simple I think he builds in terms of like, it's that full block aesthetic again, but the shading is also super clean, but he does detail the faces a little bit more where it's necessary, where the full
Right.
blocks can't quite reach. And so it's just like the little bit of balance, the full blocks to the micro blocks, but he doesn't overdo it, which I really like simply like the flowers with the amethysts, like the lilacs, maybe, not sure. Are just like it's like a really simple idea, but when you look back, it's just a really beautiful way to make them.
And I do appreciate the cleanliness, like you say, of the shapes and everything. But oddly enough, one of the
Mhm.
things I thought would improve it just a little more, not that I don't love it already, I think I really like it as it is. But I would just
Mhm.
had the thought, like, what if the night was just a little bit like more gritty or more, dirtied up a little bit more. Like
Mm.
there is some mud on the armor. Maybe if the armor weren't as shiny, or maybe if it looked more worn from battle, or maybe like even in the face, if the face looked more scruffed up and less clean. Not that it's
Mhm. Mhm.
necessary. I think the build does have a good enough contrast between the two sides and figures, but I think it could have like made it even stronger. Not that it needed it. It's a beautiful build as it is. An excellent job on the wings too. Those are a pain to make.
As much as I think we all like to think about like placements, I think sometimes there's like you just see a plot and it's just sort of like you don't really care too much about how it placed or like where it placed. You just kind of really happy looking at it. I think this was that for me. I didn't when I first saw it, I just wasn't really even grading it. I was just kind of like looking around. I was like, very much distinctive 4C style, and maybe it's also like a little bit of nostalgia because I've watched a lot of the builders build throughout the years. And so it's always nice to come back because I think he didn't participate or he tried to participate last year, but he couldn't finish. And maybe a year before that as well. And so it's always just nice to see like a style. It's like kind of comforting and kind of takes you back.
This next plot is by Snarple, and it's titled After the Last Dance. It's supposed to be a daughter wearing a VR headset and then dancing virtually with her father. Kind of clear that he's not really there because of the way he's breaking off into this pixelation effect,
Hmm.
which I think is a really cool effect. I really liked how that was done.
Yeah. I think the take on the theme using VR was a great idea. How he kind of went with sort of that fabrication of sensation through how VR is represented. It's sort of like almost like a little bit of commentary into like how technological the world has become as well. And I think the theme itself, I think, is a little bit like somber, maybe, but I think the color palette definitely livens up the mood a bit. And it's instead of like a complete sadness, because I believe in the build, little girl's crying. There's like some ice blocks at the edge of her eyes. I think in a way it's kind of like a cry of happiness of like, rejoice, reunion of seeing her father again.
The biggest thing that stands out from a technical standpoint is just the overall proportions of the build. It's very difficult to do full body figures and also have room for enough detail, especially if you want to add more detail to them, especially if you're
Mhm.
doing two people that will be very different heights. So I think there was like some
Mhm.
limitations on just like probably a contradiction of like wanting to add enough detail to these, so you had to make them big enough for that, but as a result the proportions kind of get a little bit messed up in the process because you run out of space in the plot.
Yeah. I think maybe Snarple could have made the father a little bit taller simply because the rise of his trousers are a little bit squished. That's like the inseam minus outseam, basically. And so I think that could have helped a little bit, maybe raise up the height of that by like 5-ish blocks. Could have helped a tiny bit.
Or even if you had to, like, not to say you should do things like everyone else, but we've seen some other plots already where if the organic is big enough or too big, you could also like cut off part of the figure to make it look more
Hmm.
proportionate. I think you mentioned the colors. I do like the colors and the warmness they feel, and how she's,
Hmm.
I think the description really emphasized the fake sensation of, she's not actually seeing him, but she is, and
Hmm.
she's trying to touch him, but she can't quite do it, and he's kind of dissolving right where she's trying to hold his hand.
Right. It's that duality, I think, that is really, really quite well done. The sort of, the fakeness of the sensation, but the warmness of the scene, is really, really striking. Also, I think the girl is actually quite well done. I like how she has, sneakers on, actually. It kind of sort of like, I don't know the word, casual fight to, like, make it more casual.
Or just
Um, and
emphasize that she is just a little girl, and yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I think that was a great little attention to detail thing that he did. For our final build, we will be looking at Picori Cafe's plot, titled Sensation's Heart. This one got fourth place. I think the theme or her interpretation was very, very spot on. The build is basically about how the brain can perceive and collect knowledge and sensation represented through the VR headset. You have the main organic, and then behind her, there are the four organics that represent each a different sense. So there's like a girl that's sipping on tea for taste. There is a girl smelling a
Flaming tea,
flower
I
for
might add.
smell. Say
Did you
again?
notice the flames in the tea?
Oh
It's
yeah.
flaming hot tea.
There, there's a girl with a bird. I think that's representing touch,
No,
and
that
then the
oh
music
yes, you're right. Touch and then sound of the bird song over here.
sound. Yeah, and then the VR, of course, for sight. So it's kind of like a exploration of like the brain and how it perceives all these senses together. And I think the wings are kind of an interesting thing because I think they're supposed to represent sort of like the synapse or like the brain connecting like pathways as well. That's why they're kind of like made not exactly like feathers, but kind of like these like lines that kind of connect these points. Her style is very distinctive. I didn't even know who was building this plot when I flew by at one point, but I immediately, oh, that's Picori's plot for sure. It has to be just because of the way she colors and the way I think she really likes to emphasize emotion through facial expression, and so I think it was very of her to do all of these figures, which is quite a bit of work to make 5 figures at this
Yeah.
scale in 3 weeks. Yeah, it's quite a lot of work, so kudos to her.
Yeah, that's one thing that stood out to me was this is probably the most, well, it's 5 figures. There were several that had two,
I think there was maybe a couple that had a lot of figures, but not like at
not
this
like full
scale. This
blown
one,
figures, yeah.
yeah, with like arms and legs and everything. This was almost like what's the highest point here? I think she used the whole like max heights at like
I
320 or
do
something.
love
So
how this plot is filled in. There's no wasted space. Not really. There's plenty of, even
yeah,
the floor with the giant eye, all the detail down there that wasn't absolutely necessary, but it does tie everything together and it fills in the plot space nicely.
and I think for like how much stuff there is in the plot, it's like very readable. So the composition work was done very well. I think she planned out meticulously like where everything should
Mhm.
go. And so when you look at it, you don't think of it as like crowded. You just think of it as like very well planned out.
And the colors help with that too. And of course, we have to talk about the little perspective effect of like her putting on the VR headset because when you're lower, she's just not
Yeah.
wearing it, and then you fly up and it goes onto her face. And I
Right.
love that. It just makes me happy.
Maybe we'll have Minecraft Kibo VR version coming soon. Tier
That
affiliators.
sounds like it would be a horrible building experience.
This plot had the most number one choices out of the judges. I think simply because a lot of the judges connected extremely well with like how it addressed the theme this year. And so I think like overall it was a super balanced plot in terms of the scoring rubric and how she was able to really like individually talk about each of the senses without going over and doing too much in terms of like visual cues and stuff. I think it just was very, very well represented in how the rubric was made out to be.
I guess you're kind of like me, right? Where you do like to come on and watch people work as the contest is going.
Oh yeah, I love to.
I have a little montage for the end of this video that I think is kind of fun because it shows a little bit of what everyone was up to. Thanks for helping out with the build review. I feel like you have a lot more insight than I can sometimes give on these plots, and it's always fun to hear your takes on everything.
Thank you so much for having me. You're always a pleasure to make videos with, and hopefully, we will see everyone next Kibo. Hopefully, it will be even more fun. Thank you so much.
If you would like to see these builds for yourself in-game, it is Java Edition, and I will put the server URL in the description. Thanks for watching, and may we meet again.